In today's episode of Today in World War II, March 6th, the most famed and feared Finnish sniper is shot by the Soviets. Diplomats arrive in Moscow for the endgame. Uh, some very harsh and somewhat bizarre laws against Polish farm workers. Code breakers in Hawaii notice a weird AF designation as part of a Japanese target. Future would-be Hitler assassin gets into action in Tunisia. The 8th Air Force in England, for the very first time, goes to Berlin and back. Finally, the U.S. Third Army reaches the Rhine River. Let's get started. On February 6, 1940, the most famed and infamous, as far as the Soviets were concerned, a sniper, Finnish sniper, Simo Häyhä, was shot in the lower jaw today by a Soviet soldier while in combat in Finland. He was the epitome of white death. Remember, this war, the Winter War, was fought in winter, hence the name, camouflaged all in white. He has his sniper rifle. He's buried in the snow somewhere. As I talked about ad nauseum in previous videos, the Finns would set up snipers all around these Soviet columns that would get halted and then chopped up into bite-sized pieces. They would specifically target the bonfires so that the Soviets would freeze. They would target the fuel kitchens so they would starve. Meanwhile, snipers would pick anybody raise their head. Their whole idea was to make it as miserable as possible for the Soviet soldiers. Was one of the best. In his private memoir, he said that he knows he shot and killed at least five Soviet troops. That just covers him sniping with his sniper rifle. He also spent a lot of time on skis attacking the Soviets as well with his submachine gun. It's very possible. He does not discount the fact that his actual total of Soviet soldiers killed could have been hundreds more. On this date, he did get a bullet to the lower jaw. He did not perish from this, thank goodness. Of course, he was disfigured the rest of his life. In this video, you should see a picture of him and how he looked after he from that. It was snipers like him did so much damage and put so much fear into the Soviet troops' hearts, the ones that were fighting in Finland, especially on the Karelian Isthmus, and they called them White Death. I know that there's no death involved here, white or otherwise, when it comes to you as a viewer consuming my content. All I ask of you to avoid any kind of unpleasantries is subscribe to my channel. Very easy. Click on the subscribe button, click the bell. YouTube will notify you whenever there's a new video dropped, and that way you'll help me grow my channel. We're going to stay in Finland the same date, March 6, 1940. Remember how I've been telling you in the last 10 days of the war, there were two battles going on. You had the military battle and you had the diplomatic battle. In some ways, the diplomatic battle was more important because this was going to be the end game. Having said that, because of how desperate things were getting around Viipuri on the Karelian Isthmus, the Finns were coming around to accepting terms in order to stop the war and at least keep some of their freedom and most of their territory. The latest offer the had made, they started to take seriously. The next step would be for the diplomats, representatives of the government, to go to. I've been on that train many times. You leave Helsinki, get to the border about 3, 4 hours later, and then overnight into Moscow. That's what they did. We'll be following the progress there. The end game's coming quickly. The end game is never going to come quickly to you as long as you are a good person and you like my videos and you leave comments. By doing that, it's a perfect negotiation. It's not like the Finns and the Soviets, draconian terms. No, it's a win-win. This allows me to grow my channel. I'm going to keep giving content you enjoy, and the algorithm likes all the engagement. So thanks a lot. On March 6, 1941, some bizarre new German laws were decreed in Poland that had to do with Polish farm workers and their behavior in the new German Reich. In the German hierarchy were slaves. That's all they were. They were not to have any education. Their job was to do manual labor. That was it. They stepped out of line, they get shot, killed. sent to concentration camps. These new decrees came out and said that Polish farm workers were never to complain. They were not to have any cultural events. They were even forbidden to have sexual intercourse. If you're going to treat people like slaves, weird, you wouldn't want them to have sex because you want them to create more slaves. I wasn't involved in that murderous, disgusting, horrible regime. I don't know. I just thought this was very interesting. The Germans were really everything they could to create this bizarro, evil territory and existence in the eastern part of these territories. They were going to starve the Slavs to almost non-existence. The ones that would stay would be slaves, with uneducated, just to work for their German masters, and that's it. I'll tell you what, no Jews, no Slavs, a horrible, horrible regime. March 6, 1942, famed U.S. Navy cryptographer Joseph Rochefort and his team at Pearl Harbor began noticing from Japanese signals, their signal intelligence from about from the Japanese Navy, target designation code of A starting to appear more and more often their radio messages. His team surmised that this target may very well be struck within a short period of time. We're going to get into this further as we track this, but spoiler alert, AF means March 6, 1943. Speaking of end games, we're getting very close to the end of the North Africa campaign. It's been pushed from two sides into Tunisia. Montgomery attacked him, chased him all the way from Egypt into Tunisia, the American and British landings in French North Africa. Two vices, one from the west, one from the east. Lieutenant Colonel Count Klaus von Stauffenberg, who was later one of the chief organizers of the 1944 bomb plot against Hitler, he was fighting there. He was with the 71st Warfare Regiment, rocket batteries. Rommel had made a disastrous attack on the 8th Army in Tunisia. It did not go well for them. The Nebelwerfers were brought up to support the tank's retreat. Because of the desert, when they would fire off those rockets, a cloud of dust came up, which unmasked their location. That was candy to a baby for the American and British fighter bombers. He was wounded very seriously and had to go back to Germany, put into motion a year later. On March 6, 1944, this is the first time that the United States 8th Air Force was able to make a bombing mission all the way to Berlin and back. They flew 474 bombers, and they were escorted by P-51 Mustangs. Of course, the Germans always did their damage from flak and for some fighters. So 53 B-17s were shot down, 16 B-1s were shot down. Of course, you're going to take losses there. What was most important was that they got to Berlin back, and the fighters escorted them all the way there and all the way back, which, of course, meant doom for the German cities. Even though going to take losses, the 8th Air Force was going to do real damage in daylight bombing and not take exorbitant amounts of losses. Finally, on March 6, 1945, the United States Third Army, Patton's Army, reached the Rhine River near Koblenz, Germany, and the Montgomery's command reached, or Cologne as we call it. We see now the Rhine is pretty much being taken over. The last barrier left is the Rhine River to cross into Germany proper, into the Ruhr, all the industrial might, and it's going to be all over but the shouting by then. They got to get over the Rhine first, and that's coming up next. So thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. I will talk to you tomorrow.